really is a beautiful day.
Yes, it is. I was real amazed when I heard you. I was riding in and listening. I said, "Oh, wow, she's on the show too." You know,
Yeah,
fantastic.
that was a tight squeeze.
And another thing too.
Yes.
I'm in this book.
Yes, you are. Another thing, too, listeners may not know this, but we have a billboard about our Adult Learning Center on the corner. It's really more on Clio Road opposed to Clio and Pearson Road. But it's on Clio Road. Right. It's in the Hallway Plaza parking lot behind Happy Pizza.
Is that you? Is that you in the middle?
Yeah, that's me in the middle.
Okay.
That was one of our graduations. Yeah. And our GED graduates do wear a cap and gown.
Right.
Because we do have a cap and gown ceremony. And those were two women who graduated from our program who were residents of Flint Housing Commission. And I'm very proud of those two women. One of the ladies said that she's constantly getting phone calls because she feels like she's a celebrity. And I said, well, it was put up there so people could call me for enrollment for adult education. So very proud of that. And yes, our new quarterly newsletter is out. And the newsletter main focus is talking about different ways of teaching individuals, not necessarily the brick and mortar that we're used to, but this radio show is another avenue to expose educational knowledge to listeners in the Genesee County area. So if you don't have a copy of our newsletter, please give us a call at 810-553-2140, and we'd be glad to mail you a copy. Now, who we have over in the corner here, we have our dynamic video photographer. How you doing, Paul?
I didn't think you were going to talk to me.
I have attorneys over here, so I'm going to be nice.
I didn't think you were going to talk to me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. What did you do this weekend?
Oh, girl, I did a little bit of everything. I went to a Flint soup last night.
Oh, yeah, I watched the video. How was it?
It was fabulous.
Did that lady win the whole $800?
The whole $800.
So they raised $800, raffled it off, and this lady won.
It's not like raffling off. You have to give a speech or a presentation, and whatever presentation is most compelling gets the money at the end of the night. It's fabulous. You know,
and this is a monthly event, quarterly? Every month?
And they bounce around the city.
Oh, I need to get my speech together.
Get it together, girl.
And go over there.
You and me, we'll compete.
Well, hopefully they'll raise more than $800 when you and I speak.
I hope so, because you're supposed to bring your friends.
Oh, okay.
You know, your friends are supposed to bring the $5 to put in the kitty, so if you bring 40 friends, the pot gets bigger and bigger.
All right.
Yeah.
I got it. Well, listeners, in the studio tonight we have two wonderful attorneys from Legal Services of Eastern Michigan. The first person we have here is Nick Lucic. He is a staff attorney and fair housing education and outreach project manager for Legal Service of Eastern Michigan. He attained a Juris Doctorate from Michigan State College of Law and a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science and Economics from Saginaw Valley State University. Nick's work focuses on Flint housing. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. Fair housing.
No problem.
Fair housing and housing law, which entails filing fair housing complaints in partnership with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, assisting individuals with disabilities in getting accommodations or modifications, and assisting tenant clients with eviction actions, security deposit returns, repair concerns, and more. And I want to tell you thank you. Also, who we have in the studio, we have Katie Stanley.
Yes, ma'am.
Gosh. She's also a staff attorney and fair housing education and outreach coordinator with Legal Services of Eastern Michigan. She attained her Juris Doctorates in public law from Western Michigan University, Thomas M. Cooley Law School, a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Social and Ethics, Psychology, and Sociology from the University of Michigan Flint, and is a Master's of Not-for-Profit Administration candidate. I read that a couple of times today.
Yes,
Congratulations
on
that.
Last term.
Yes. At the University of Michigan, is that Rockham Graduate School? Katie is the chair of the Genesee County Bar Association Community Action Committee and also serves as a board member for Factory 2 Maker Space, the Flint local committee and also serves, oh, I said that already. Paul got me messed up. The Flint Local 432 Performing Arts Venue and Blue Water Safe Horizon Domestic Violence and Homeless Shelter. So thank you. That was a lot, wasn't it?
Say, yeah.
That was a lot. So I want to say thank you to both of you for being here. And tonight, listeners, we're going to be talking about fair housing and what are your rights. And if you have any questions and you'd like to participate in this conversation, please give us a call at 239-5733. Again, the number is 239-5733. So I have two wonderful individuals here, and I'm going to present a question. Both of you can collaborate or either one at a, whatever you choose to do, whatever your knowledge is. So the first question I have for you is, how does fair housing laws apply to real life situations?
Well, that's the beauty of the Fair Housing Act. It actually applies to individuals in all real-life situations.
Okay.
Essentially what it is it was enacted in 1968 through the Civil Rights Act, as part of the Civil Rights Act. And it was amended throughout the years to include federal protections for individuals in their buying of housing or renting of housing. So if you're an individual within a protected class, which everybody is, you're protected. And what I want to get to real quick is to talk about what protections there are that are afforded under the Fair Housing Act specifically.
Okay.
Under federal law, there are 7 federally protected classes. Those are race, color, national origin, familial status, disability, religion,
Sex.
and gender or sex. And those protected classes are what we identify as characteristics that can be used in real life situations. So I'm going to give a hypothetical about what we do sometimes to identify discrimination in our community.
Okay.
So Legal Services of Eastern Michigan's Fair Housing Center does have a testing program. Individuals in the community essentially become testers, mystery shoppers. They get trained by our testing coordinator to conduct a very neutral, basic level investigation, asking questions and fielding answers from leasing agents or financial institution, brokers, real estate brokers, etc. Basically, we'll send one person from a federally protected class. So in this instance, I'll use race. An African-American individual will go into a leasing office, ask general questions about what's available at that complex. Can they inspect a unit? Are there any fees associated with pets, etc.? They'll be given that information from the leasing office agent, and in retrospect, we'll send a Caucasian individual to identify any misconceptions in the leasing process.
Okay.
So the policies and procedures by agents at apartments need to be consistent, concise, and they need to be equal for everybody that goes in.
That is true.
So if an African-American individual goes in and the leasing agent says, well, we have nothing available right now, but they do, our testing program will reveal that hidden form of discrimination. Essentially what they're doing is they're offering different terms, conditions, procedures based upon a person's protected class, which is unlawful under the Fair Housing Act. In addition to that, something that's very important to denote when it comes to fair housing laws and how they apply to individual situations, it is not only in the renting process. It is also if you are a tenant already. The most common form of discrimination that we've noticed recently is disability discrimination.
Okay. Okay.
What is a disability? Well, it's any individual who has a physical or mental impairment. It can be an individual who has a record of having such an impairment, or it can be an individual who's perceived as having such an impairment. People with disabilities have issues with respect to the accessibility of some housing. most often they'll ask for accommodations or modifications within their housing, and the apartment complex or landlord won't understand what that means. So what is a reasonable accommodation? Well, it is a change in rules, policies, practices, etc. from that landowner or landlord so as to afford an individual with a disability equal use and enjoyment of their property.
Okay.
What are some common examples of a reasonable accommodation? Well, they can be, let's say I have a service animal or an emotional support animal, but my landlord has a no pet policy. My landlord charges fees for pets. My landlord also charges a security deposit for a pet, or some kind of a pet deposit, on top of a security deposit. Well, an accommodation is a change in those rules, policies, and procedures. Service animals and emotional support animals are not considered pets. So your landlord needs to afford you with an equal opportunity to use and enjoy your dwelling, your housing. They need to modify those terms in order to allow you to have that service animal or emotional support animal.
Let me ask you a question. Those
Sure.
emotional support animals, is there a doctor notification? Is there some kind of doctor or legal paperwork that states that's what this animal is for, and they can turn that into the office to support? That's the purpose of them having the animal there on the premises?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, your landlord can ask you, what is your disability? They can't ask, how did you get your disability? But one thing that your landlord can request is if you present an accommodation request, they can ask you, please present us with medical verification to show that you require this accommodation.
Okay.
So when it comes to emotional support animals, a landlord can say, I'm going to approve your accommodation request, but I require you to provide me with some form of medical verification to prove that you in fact require this animal as part of your disability. And that is something that's reasonable, it's lawful, and the prospective individual seeking the accommodation must present that medical verification in order to have their accommodation approved, accepted, and the change in their policies shifted to allow them the opportunity to use and enjoy their housing with their emotional support animal.
Now, would that be the only accommodation when it comes to the animal? The fees that's associated with having the animal there, would that be waived? Is that part of the accommodation as well?
Yes. Your landlord cannot charge you a pet fee or a pet deposit fee if you have a valid emotional support animal or service animal and you require a change in their no pet policy. If they issue pet fees, pet deposit fees, they have to waive those.
Wow.
The only thing your landlord can do is ask you for medical verification. If there are instances where accommodations can be unreasonable or unduly burdensome to your landlord, if your landlord determines that's the case, they can deny a reasonable request for an accommodation.
Okay.
But in instances where you're simply seeking an emotional support animal to reside with you, you have your proof from your physician indicating that you require this animal for your disability, it alleviates symptoms related to your disability, your landlord must approve your accommodation and cannot charge you fees associated with that.
And regardless of breed, so your landlord might have a breed
Regardless
restriction.
of breed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so say they have a no pit bull policy wherein their insurance policies don't cover pit bulls. Emotional support and service animals can be pit bulls, or regardless of breed restrictions, your landlord can't reasonably deny them.
Yeah.
That's very enlightening. I would say I'm a
Fascinating.
landlord, so that's teaching me something there.
Okay, we'll be careful.
Yes, very much so. But I want to go back to something when you were talking about the protective classes. And I want the listeners to get a clear breakdown. What is the difference between race and your origin?
Well, your national origin is essentially your ancestry, where you're from. I can be a white individual from Canada. So my national origin is Canadian. And that's generally the breakdown of how it works.
All right. Okay. Did you want to chime in on that question at all?
Yeah, so I mean, as part of our testing in our Fair Housing Center, we may send someone, say, wearing a hijab to a rental unit, and then someone who presents as a non-Muslim individual, or someone who presents as maybe someone from a different national origin, so say someone who presents as Middle Eastern. Nick raises a great point that Nick is, you can be a Caucasian individual from Canada, and that may not present the same and result in the same discriminatory acts as some of the other protected classes, whereas your race is more to do with your ethnic background and your, the way that you present. So we try to test around those things to uncover discrimination in our jurisdiction and combat that.
The individuals that's trained to do this, are they compensated or are they volunteers?
Yes, yeah, so we compensate based on, we give mileage, we give $25 per rental unit and apartment, $35 per housing. Or did we change it recently?
It is $25 for apartments, but it's $30 for sales and mobile homes.
Yes.
Okay.
Real estate brokerages as well. And we do compensate for mileage expended to and from the test sites.
Okay.
So it's not a full-time position. It is something that you can do on your spare time to help your community, to better our community, attempt to further our mission statement, which is to end discrimination. So you're doing something good. You're getting a little bit of compensation for it. And it's something that'll make you feel better about where you live, because I know I love the slogan that was used when we do our Fair Housing Conference, which is love where you live.
That is true.
I love where I live.
True.
I want the community to be feel the same way as me. And one way we can do that is to work together to combat discrimination. And that's the important part of having the Fair Housing Center and having a community that's passionate about ending discrimination and we can help you can help us type of thing.
You sound passionate. Both of you sound very passionate. I watch your face. You just have a beautiful smile as you talk about this.
Yeah, we welcome all folks to participate in testing. We would love for anyone that's interested to give us a call. Our number is 800-322-4512. We will set you up with a testing training and help you get that process started. Like Nick was explaining, a lot of discrimination that happens today is more latent. It's not so much something that may come out right out in the open. Someone may come in and get offered a certain term or condition in their lease, and the next person that comes in may get offered a different term or condition. Or they may try to steer them to certain units that are that is against your right as a lessor to try to go wherever you would like to live. Those sorts of things you may not realize are happening when they're happening to you until we do the testing and it's uncovered. So it's important that we do this, and it's important that our community participates.
Wow. Next question I have for you. How has historical discrimination in housing affected our community?
So that is a huge and broad question. A lot of folks remember the New Deal. We had great products of the New Deal, like low interest rate mortgages, infrastructure building, but a lot of people don't remember the institutional racism that was a part of the New Deal. We had what was called the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which created neighborhood residential mapping, which is what we call redlining today. So if you take studies by economists that are even as recent as 2010 and beyond, they're finding disparities along those residential mapping that were done in the early 1900s as a part of the New Deal, as a part of systemic and institutionalized racism. There's a phrase that's called de jure segregation, which is segregation by law. Things like Brown v. Board of Education, things that are very black and white. But then there's also de facto segregation, which is segregation in fact. A lot of people think that institutional racism as a result of our government and mandated de jure segregation and racism has become so integrated with societal norms, cultural norms, institutions, access to good education, quality health care, healthy food to eat, all these different factors that kind of conflate into what makes a healthy and happy individual and what our Constitution affords as the right to pursue happiness. You know, we are all created equal with endowed with unalienable rights. A lot of folks make the argument that it is so conflated now with what was de jure segregation at one time.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate them at this
That is
point,
true.
right? So you see all these residual effects. And then the Flint water crisis is a great example of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You know what, Al, see if you can help me with this. And if one of my family members are listening, I would like for them to call because I want to make sure I can get this right. But those boundaries I know to be true because when I was growing up during the 70s. And my grandfather used to always talk about something about being across the tracks. And across the tracks.
St. John area.
That is a great point. So so the Homeowners Loan Corporation had what was called the underwriting manual of the Federal Homeowners Corporation. In the manual, it explicitly stated that good ways, first of all, that incompatible, and I use this in quotes because it's so unfortunate, racial groups could not live together. And they advised that good ways to separate those groups were walls, railroad tracks, like you're saying. You still see some of these today, like the 8 Mile Wall is a great example. That was built to separate. Yeah, that was built to separate and create insurability because essentially what it was mapping showing that they would back these insurance rates. And that still exists today in the sense that we see it along credit scores. Most middle-class folks gain their wealth from their equity in their homes. You see disparity in equity in that sense. Home ownership is extremely low in the African-American community and folks of color as a result of this institutional racism. And there's this saying, right, that you're supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but when everybody's not starting from the same starting point, I don't see how that's a fair statement.
Yeah, it's something also about our Social Security number. Your Social Security number, there's a certain part of your Social Security number they can now target where you were born, not necessarily the state anymore, exactly where you were born. And I do find that almost like, what you're talking about, it's almost like gerrymandering. Is that what they were talking about earlier, is those lines that's drawn in order to discriminate people for certain things. But I do remember my grandfather talking about that because he was stating, because when we moved from off of Saginaw Street, Moore Street. I must have been like 2, no, my brother would be 2. So I was probably like 4 when we moved from over there. So we moved across the track, over the tracks, and we moved to Sally Court. I'm not sure what's
Sally
that.
Court.
If that's not considered.
No, that's not across the track.
That's in the
That's
tracks.
in the, that's more
West.
We're west.
yeah,
Northwest.
Sally Court is like off of between Clio Road, an area right there between Clio and Pearson Road. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That was supposed to be then. They call it the Model City.
But it was predominantly white at that time.
Right. So they changed it. They made it Model City. Coming from Martin Luther King and from Martin Luther King on up, right? That was called Model City.
Okay.
They still got the sign up there.
I don't know anything about it. Now I guess I have to look.
Well, you guys might remember a lot of those neighborhoods had in their deeds what were called restrictive covenants that said that you couldn't lease to folks that weren't Caucasian or you couldn't sell to folks that weren't. And a lot of people to get around that would use like a buyer that would present as white and then they would present as the owner to get in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I wonder how my grandfather got that house because there was a white doctor who lived there.
Well, so like my grandmother, my mama did. Okay, she moved over there on Barber Drive.
Yes.
Okay.
Around the corner.
That was white.
All of that was.
All the area was. Okay. What's his name? Johnny Goodman.
Okay.
He had houses. And he sold my grandmother. And he was a black man.
Okay.
He sold my grandmother that house.
Okay.
That's right. Sure did. So far as anything, you know, he came from across the track. I gather him and his kid. I know his son very well, Bruce. Bruce good. And they had to get into the housing and bought up a lot of property.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. General Motors allotted a lot of those individuals to be able to cross over the tracks to
Yes, they
purchase
did.
those homes.
Yes, they did.
So we were very blessed because then I went to a different school, a different environment. Well, I finally went to school because when we lived on Moore Street, I wasn't able to go to school. I was too young. But then I grew up in the Flint schools, and we
Right there
attended.
with Dewey.
My aunts and everything, and my mom now went there, but I went to Brunel. Actually, we went to the units that they converted over to houses over the years, but there was Sally Court units, and we used to walk to school. Don't do that anymore, you know. We used to walk to school, and then we left the units, and then we went to Brunel. And then we went to homes, and then, of course, Northwestern was down and around the corner. So I'm glad you told me that. That's going to be a conversation when I get home with my mom, especially with my aunt. I want to know, how did Granddaddy get that house?
Yeah, and a lot of those GM-funded homes in
Yeah.
the beginning were actually segregated. That was a part of, I think, what we'll talk about a little bit later, but the history of fair housing in Flint was that those homes made by GM, folks were coming back from the war, like Floyd McCree, who was a World War II veteran and one of our first black mayors in our city. Those homes were originally not, they were all segregated. So a lot of our fair housing in the city of Flint arose from the disparity in treatment in those housing units, those GM housing units.
Wow.
And I think it is important to note as well that the historical discrimination that affected the communities is not only pertaining to the redlining that occurred back in the day, but steering as well was a common component of how we got our communities so segregated. Real estate brokerages would essentially have their real estate agents telling people, this is not for you, maybe you should move into a home over here. And as a result, you were splitting up people based upon their race and protected classes. It's not good.
I'm going to have you come back. 30 minutes go by so
It
fast.
Yes, it does.
It goes by so fast, and you've enlightened me on so much information. I want to thank both of you for coming and accepting my invitation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having
And
us.
Paul, I want to tell you,
Yes?
thank you this evening.
Huh? Are you being nice to me? What'd I do?
What do you think about tonight's topic?
I liked it. You know, my grandfather was in New Jersey, and he's what they call a high yellow.
Light skin, very light skin.
And he was able to buy houses for people and sell them to black folks in Orange, New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah. I know another person did that in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when they found out he was black, then there were some problems. Yes, it was. So, listeners, I want to tell you.
Tractor and rode up here.
Oh, you didn't get on that. What's that plane you call it?
A paraglider.
Yeah, your paraglider and do it. Listeners, I want to tell you so much. Thank you for listening to me on tonight. Hopefully you tune in tomorrow at 5:30 for State Representative Neely's show. And if you have any other questions about our CHIA Adult Skills Center, please give us a call at 810-553-2140. And I wish everyone a wonderful work week.
I wasn't always this good. I had a lot to learn. I had to practice. And practice. And practice. Until one day, my dream came true. Sure, it wasn't easy, but it was worth it.